What takes place when one of Hollywood's most recognizable icons decides she's tired of subtle jabs and public disrespect on national television? What unfolds when years of quiet tolerance suddenly give way to a firm refusal to be diminished? This is the story of the moment Jennifer Lopez reportedly put Joy Behar in her place on The View, creating one of the most talked about exchanges in daytime TV. It's a tale centered on influence, dignity, and the consequences of pushing someone too far. The appearance was meant to be straightforward. Jennifer Lopez had a new venture to promote, and The View was looking forward to the ratings boost that comes with hosting a global superstar. The format was expected to be predictable, courteous questions, polished answers, light humor, and a smooth wrap-up. That's how these segments typically unfold. Yet from the instant Lopez stepped onto the stage, there was an undercurrent in the room that felt unusual. The atmosphere carried a tension that was hard to ignore, as if something unscripted was waiting to happen. The panel, including Whoopi Goldberg and Sarah Haynes, greeted Lopez warmly. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause as she sat down, dressed in a sharp white blazer that caught the studio lights perfectly. She appeared poised and confident, embodying the professionalism she's known for. However, Joy Behar's demeanor stood apart. Her smile looked restrained, her posture stiff, and there was a noticeable intensity in her gaze that hinted she might not stick to pleasantries. Initially, the discussion flowed as anticipated. Lopez spoke about her newest business projects, her creative endeavors, and her family life. She was engaging and articulate, drawing on decades of experience navigating interviews. The other hosts posed thoughtful, respectful questions, clearly interested in her perspective. Lopez seemed comfortable, even amused at times, sharing anecdotes with ease. Then the tone shifted abruptly. Joy Behar interrupted a story Lopez was telling about her production company. She leaned forward and remarked that there was something she had been meaning to ask for quite some time. The sudden change caught the other hosts off guard. Their exchanged glances made that clear. Lopez's expression tightened ever so slightly, but she remained composed, inviting Behar to continue. Behar's question was framed as curiosity, but its edge was unmistakable. She commented on Lopez's longevity in the entertainment industry and questioned how she had managed to remain relevant, referencing what she described as a limited vocal range. The remark landed heavily. The studio fell into a near silence, and even the audience seemed unsure how to react. Lopez did not immediately respond with emotion. Years of media training had equipped her to handle difficult moments gracefully. Still, there was a flicker in her eyes that revealed she understood the implication. She asked calmly whether Behar was suggesting she did not merit her accomplishments. Rather than retreat, Behar pressed on. She compared Lopez to vocal powerhouses like Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey, implying that Lopez's success was puzzling given the perceived difference in vocal ability. She then pivoted to Lopez's acting career, questioning whether she had ever been considered truly serious in that field and suggesting that many of her roles felt repetitive. The discomfort at the table was palpable. Attempts to soften the exchange were brushed aside as Behar continued. It was no longer subtle. The critique was direct and pointed. Lopez's composure held, but her demeanor shifted. Her hands gripped the edge of the table lightly, and while she maintained a smile, it carried a new firmness. When she finally responded, her voice was steady yet resolute. She noted that the direction of the conversation differed from what she had anticipated, but since her career was being scrutinized, she was prepared to address it thoroughly. Turning squarely toward Behar, she acknowledged that she was not Whitney Houston, emphasizing that no one could replicate Houston's singular talent. At the same time, she made it clear that her own path was built on dedication and authenticity. Lopez outlined the tangible achievements she had earned through relentless work. With over 80 million records sold worldwide and numerous chart-topping hits, she highlighted the undeniable impact of her music. She spoke about carving out a niche that resonated with millions without trying to imitate anyone else's style. Success, she implied, comes in many forms, and artistry cannot be measured by vocal acrobatics alone. Her response extended beyond statistics. She underscored the importance of connecting with audiences, building a brand rooted in perseverance, and evolving across multiple industries. From music and film to fashion and entrepreneurship, her career has been defined by versatility and resilience. The suggestion that longevity was accidental did not align with the sustained effort she described. The studio's energy shifted once again, this time in Lopez's favor. The clarity and conviction in her words reframed the narrative. Rather than appearing defensive, she came across as assertive and self-assured. The tension that had crackled moments earlier now felt redirected. What made the exchange so compelling was not just the critique itself, but the response. Instead of reacting emotionally, Lopez delivered a composed yet pointed reminder that accomplishments speak volumes. She did not attempt to claim talents she does not possess, nor did she diminish others. Instead, she reaffirmed her own journey and the work behind it. Moments like this resonate because they highlight the fine line between candid commentary and personal attack. They also demonstrate how maintaining composure under pressure can transform an uncomfortable situation into a defining one. In an industry where public perception often shapes careers, standing firm without losing grace can leave a lasting impression. The conversation became a testament to self-advocacy. Lopez's measured defense illustrated that strength does not always require raised voices. Sometimes it is found in unwavering eye contact, controlled tone, and facts delivered with confidence. Joy attempted to cut in, but Jennifer continued without missing a beat. Regarding my acting, she said steadily, I find it surprising that you dismiss it so lightly. I've received Golden Globe nominations. I've collaborated with some of the most acclaimed filmmakers in the industry. I've portrayed characters in stories that connected with audiences across the world. If that doesn't qualify as meaningful acting in your eyes, then perhaps we simply define the word differently. The atmosphere in the studio had grown thick with tension. The other panelists looked uneasy, clearly searching for a way to ease the escalating clash, yet neither woman seemed willing to yield. Joy, sensing that her earlier remarks hadn't unsettled Jennifer as intended, pushed further. But don't you think there's something to be said for sticking to one path? Joy asked pointedly. You sing, you act, you run businesses. Some would argue that trying to excel in so many areas means you're stretched too thin. That was when Jennifer's composure shifted in a noticeable way. The courteous exterior slipped just enough to reveal unmistakable intensity beneath. Staying in my lane, she repeated, her tone lowering, sharpened with resolve. Joy, let me ask you something. What exactly is your lane? The question lingered heavily in the air. Joy's confident expression flickered for a brief second, clearly not anticipating the reversal. Still, she quickly gathered herself, her voice adopting a defensive firmness. My lane. I'm a comedian, I'm a television host, I've spent decades in this business. I'm well aware of what my lane is. Jennifer inclined her head slowly, her gaze unwavering. A comedian, she echoed thoughtfully. Interesting. And when was the last time you performed stand-up? When did you last face an audience that wasn't obligated by contract to be there? The co-hosts exchanged anxious glances. This was unfamiliar territory and the entire studio seemed suspended in silence. Joy's cheeks reddened slightly, but she pressed forward. I don't need to validate my career to you. I've been on television longer than you've been a household name. I've earned this seat through persistence and dedication. Your craft, Jennifer repeated, the edge in her voice unmistakable now. Let me explain something about perseverance. While you were seated behind a desk offering sarcastic commentary about other people's work, I was rehearsing choreography until my body ached. I was attending acting workshops, vocal training sessions, dialect coaching. I studied with some of the finest instructors available. I performed live in arenas where audiences would let you know instantly if you weren't giving everything you had. She leaned forward slightly, commanding attention without raising her voice. You talk about lanes. I never confined myself to one because I refused to accept limitations others tried to place on me. Every time someone insisted I couldn't succeed at something, I doubled my effort. When critics claimed a girl from the Bronx had no place in Hollywood, I proved them wrong. When they doubted my acting ability, I kept accepting challenging roles until I demonstrated my range. When they questioned my business instincts, I built brands that thrived. Joy attempted to interrupt again. Surely you can admit there's merit in concentrating on one discipline and mastering it, rather than branching into multiple industries at once. A brief, sharp laugh escaped Jennifer, devoid of humor. Concentrating on one thing. Joy, you've been occupying the same chair for 2 decades. You read from a teleprompter, offer commentary on public figures, and occasionally challenge guests who are here to share their projects. If that's your idea of professional focus, then we clearly measure achievement differently. At last, Whoopi Goldberg tried to intercede, her voice steady but measured, suggesting they redirect the discussion. Yet neither participant appeared ready to disengage, attack guests. Joy's voice rose slightly. I pose necessary questions. I don't just sit here tossing easy prompts so celebrities can promote whatever they're selling. Genuine journalism involves asking uncomfortable questions. Jennifer's eyebrows lifted, and for the first time during the exchange, she smiled, though the expression lacked warmth. Journalism. Joy, when was the last time you broke an exclusive story? When did you conduct investigative reporting? When did you produce something that qualified as reporting rather than opinion or commentary? The precision of the rebuttal left little room for maneuvering. Joy opened her mouth, then closed it again, momentarily at a loss. The confidence that had colored her earlier remarks seemed diminished as she searched for a response. Jennifer continued, her tone calm but unyielding. There's a distinction between challenging someone thoughtfully and undermining them for sport. I have no issue discussing my career, my choices, or my growth, but framing hard work and evolution as confusion or lack of focus does a disservice to the reality of what it takes to sustain a career for decades. She spoke not with outrage but with clarity. Expanding into different arenas isn't about dilution. It's about ambition. It's about refusing to be boxed in by other people's expectations. The entertainment industry changes constantly. Surviving in it requires adaptability, resilience, and a willingness to learn continuously. The room remained silent, the earlier tension now replaced with a different kind of gravity. The exchange had shifted from provocation to a broader reflection on what defines success. Jennifer's presence filled the space, not through volume, but through conviction. She explained that her journey was never about competing with singular legends or mimicking established paths. It was about building something distinct, layer by layer. Music, film, fashion. Each chapter demanded effort and sacrifice. None were accidental detours, they were deliberate expansions fueled by discipline and determination. Joy's earlier smirk had faded entirely. When she finally responded, her voice no longer carried the same sharp certainty. The balance of the conversation had undeniably changed, and the dynamic at the table felt altered in a way that could not be ignored. I offer analysis, Joy insisted. I break down current events and give perspective. That is a valid branch of journalism. Perspective, Jennifer repeated with a slow nod. Opinion pieces, speculation, passing judgment on other people's achievements without ever stepping into the arena to create something original yourself. She allowed a brief silence to stretch across the studio before continuing. I've been in this industry long enough to recognize envy when it's staring back at me, and what I'm witnessing right now feels like someone who has built a career from the sidelines, critiquing those who actually step onto the field. The room had fallen completely quiet. Even the production crew appeared motionless, as if afraid to disrupt the charged atmosphere. The color drained from Joy's face, her fingers clutching the table so tightly her knuckles blanched. Jealous? You believe I'm jealous of you. I believe you resent anyone who has achieved something beyond sitting at a desk and complaining, Jennifer answered evenly. I think you resent people who take chances, who risk failure in front of millions, who pour themselves into projects that resonate. I think you resent individuals who construct something enduring rather than dismantling what others have worked to build. Joy's voice wavered, whether from anger or nerves. How dare you come here and make this personal? You were invited as a guest. I have always conducted myself professionally with you. Professionally, Jennifer echoed with disbelief. You began by mocking my voice, diminishing my acting career, and implying I don't merit the success I've earned. If that qualifies as professionalism to you, then perhaps we need to redefine the term entirely. She adjusted her posture, rising slightly from her seat without fully standing, yet somehow commanding the entire table. Do you know what truly separates us? When critics analyze my work, they're discussing something tangible I created, songs I performed, films I acted in, businesses I developed, shows I produced. When critics evaluate you, what exactly are they assessing? Your ability to read cue cards, your talent for delivering biting remarks about people who are actually pursuing their dreams? Sarah Haynes attempted to redirect the exchange, her voice tight with urgency. Jennifer, maybe you could share more about what's coming up next in your career. But it was evident that neither woman was willing to retreat into safer territory. I've entertained and informed millions for decades, Joy shot back, her tone cracking slightly. I have a devoted audience that values what I contribute here. Entertained, Jennifer mused, tilting her head. Is that what we're calling this? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks closer to intimidation. It resembles someone who never risked standing center stage, using her platform to belittle those who have. Her voice gained strength, steady and commanding. Authentic entertainment uplifts people. It sparks happiness, offers escape, provides inspiration. What you're describing doesn't uplift, feels like negativity disguised as commentary. Joy's composure continued to unravel, her frustration written plainly across her face. Instead of de-escalating, she pressed harder. You want to discuss negativity? Fine. Let's address the image you've marketed for years. The surgeries, the endless reinventions, the carefully curated persona. Let's talk about how much of it is manufactured. The shift in Jennifer's expression was immediate. The calculated restraint that had characterized her responses gave way to something more instinctive, more formidable. The co-host sensed it as well. Whoopi Goldberg even lifted a hand slightly, as though she could physically halt what was about to unfold. It was too late. Jennifer rose to her feet slowly, her chair gliding back a few inches. She didn't shout or flail her arms. Yet her presence expanded to fill the entire studio, her stillness more commanding than any outburst could have been. When she spoke, her voice was low but unmistakably clear, reaching every corner of the room. Joy, she said quietly, pronouncing the name with deliberate precision. You've just crossed a line. She placed her palms firmly on the table and leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. You want to discuss authenticity? Let's discuss authenticity. I started with nothing and built a career from the ground up. That's real. I've sacrificed sleep, comfort, and privacy to reach this point. That's real. Millions of people across the globe have found happiness, comfort, and motivation in the work I've created. That's real. Joy attempted to interject, mumbling that she hadn't intended to offend, but Jennifer cut her off without raising her volume. No, you intended exactly this. You aim to diminish me because that's what you do. You occupy that seat and chip away at others because it distracts from what you haven't built yourself. Her words were measured yet unrelenting. You call it commentary, but there's a distinction between thoughtful critique and habitual disparagement. There's a difference between asking meaningful questions and launching personal attacks. She straightened slightly, though her eyes never left Joy's. I've faced criticism my entire career. I've been told I wasn't talented enough, polished enough, worthy enough. Each time, I responded by working harder, learning more, expanding further. What have you built outside of this table? What risks have you taken that could have cost you everything? The silence that followed was heavier than before. It was no longer simply tense, it was reflective, charged with the weight of everything that had been said. You talk about reinvention like it's deception, Jennifer continued. Reinvention is growth, it's evolution. It's refusing to remain stagnant because someone else thinks you should stay the same. I've changed because I've learned. I've adapted because the world changes. That isn't artificial. That's resilience. Her tone softened slightly though it retained its firmness. If you want to critique my work, critique the work. Debate the music. Analyze the films. Discuss the businesses. But don't confuse personal attacks with journalistic integrity. Joy remained seated, visibly shaken, her earlier confidence nowhere in sight. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely. Jennifer hadn't raised her voice or resorted to insults, she had simply refused to be diminished. You can continue offering commentary, Jennifer said finally. Just understand that there's a responsibility that comes with a platform. Words carry weight. And when you use them to undermine rather than illuminate, that choice says more about you than it ever will about me. Jennifer's tone intensified with every sentence, her presence growing more dominant as she continued. But let's talk about what's genuinely real joy. Let's focus on the truth. You've never built anything that truly impacted people's lives. You've never sparked inspiration. You've never contributed something that made someone's day brighter through your work. The silence in the studio became overwhelming, even the faint hum of the ventilation system seemed amplified. Joy's lips parted as if searching for a rebuttal, but nothing emerged. The co-hosts looked as though they were witnessing something catastrophic unfold in slow motion, unable to intervene yet unable to look away. Jennifer pressed on, her voice resonating through the room with unwavering clarity. Here's another reality, she continued. When you leave here tonight, you'll still be carrying the same bitterness you had this morning. You'll remain someone whose proudest accomplishment is sitting behind a desk, making cutting remarks about people who are actually pursuing their ambitions. Your legacy will be a string of sarcastic jabs and attempts at humor that never quite land. Joy finally managed to speak, though her words were faint. You can't address me this way. This is my show, your show? Jennifer let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. This isn't your personal platform. It's a program you happen to be part of. You're not the central figure. You're barely even supporting cast. You're the one tasked with saying what others won't, and everyone excuses it with a shrug, saying that's just how you are, as though habitual cruelty is some charming trait. She straightened, her stance commanding despite the confined space. Do you know what's truly disappointing about today? You were given an opportunity. You had someone across from you who has actually built something meaningful. We could have had a substantial conversation. You could have asked about perseverance, about the obstacles I've navigated, about the lessons learned through decades of trial and error. We could have discussed creativity, resilience, the discipline it takes to construct something lasting. Joy appeared to shrink in her chair, her earlier bravado evaporating as Jennifer's words struck with precision. Instead, you chose pettiness. You chose to belittle. You squandered this moment trying to undermine someone whose career achievements exceed anything you've ever attempted. Whoopi's voice finally broke through, strained and cautious, suggesting a commercial break. Yet Jennifer wasn't done. The room sensed another decisive statement approaching. The most unfortunate part, Joy, is that you once had genuine talent. I've seen recordings of your early stand-up routines. You were sharp, you had timing, intelligence, originality. But somewhere along the way, you decided it was easier to criticize than to create. You opted for the safety of this desk rather than stepping back into the spotlight and risking vulnerability in pursuit of something meaningful. The statement lingered heavily. Joy's complexion had turned pale, her hands visibly trembling. When she responded, her voice was barely audible. You don't know anything about me. I know exactly what I'm saying, Jennifer replied quietly, though her words carried unmistakable force. I'm describing someone who abandoned her own aspirations and now tries to discourage others from chasing theirs. Someone who has grown so comfortable with mediocrity that excellence feels threatening. Someone who mistakes cynicism for insight and harshness for honesty. She reached for her purse beside her chair, every movement deliberate and composed. Here's the reality, Joy. Your assessment of me, your attempts to minimize what I've built, your cutting remarks, they don't alter my life in the slightest. Tomorrow, I will still wake up as myself. I will still have my work, my loved ones, my accomplishments, and the fulfillment that comes with them. But you will remain in this same seat, clinging to moments where you try to assert power by unsettling a guest on a daytime program. Joy made one last attempt to regain authority, calling out for security and accusing Jennifer of hostility. Jennifer's expression softened into a genuine smile for the first time during the exchange, though it carried an unmistakable edge. Hostile? I've simply spoken candidly. If honesty feels like aggression, perhaps that says more about your comfort with it than anything about me. She then turned toward the other panelists, her demeanor shifting instantly to warmth and professionalism. She thanked them graciously for the invitation and apologized for the unexpected direction the conversation had taken. Finally, she faced the camera, addressing viewers directly with the poise and magnetism that had defined her career. She reminded them that no one has the authority to diminish their worth, no one is entitled to belittle their dreams or achievements. She urged them not to internalize someone else's limitations as their own. With that, she exited the set, her heels striking the floor with calm assurance. Behind her, Joy remained seated, motionless and visibly shaken. The remaining hosts scrambled to regain composure, but the energy in the studio had irrevocably shifted. Nothing said afterward could rival the intensity of what had just transpired. The camera lingered perhaps a moment too long on Joy's expression, capturing a mixture of shock, embarrassment, and what appeared to be dawning awareness. It was the look of someone accustomed to delivering sharp commentary, suddenly confronted with its impact when redirected at her. The episode quickly became the subject of widespread discussion, a moment replayed and debated across platforms. For many, it represented an example of refusing to be diminished. For others, it was a startling display of confrontation rarely seen in daytime television. What remained undeniable was the shift in power that had occurred. The narrative had flipped entirely. A guest who had been expected to endure criticism instead asserted control, turning scrutiny back toward its source. The exchange stood as a vivid illustration of standing firm under pressure, of challenging dismissiveness head-on, and of reminding critics that strength does not always come from the loudest voice in the room, but from the certainty behind it.